Hi, everyone. Welcome. Excuse me. Nice to have you here today. I'm just going to share my screen here. Welcome. And thank you for joining. This is such a great conference. I think parents and caregivers are critical partners when it comes to building well-being, which is really my area of research and focus and work. So I'm very excited to talk about some of the synergies and important things I think we can all do to work together to bring more coping skills to students. Certainly, I think we already were noting students and children quite overwhelmed by the amount of stress that they have in their lives with so many layers there. And I don't think the pandemic has really ameliorated that situation. So more than ever, students need to be taught explicitly and supported in having these positive coping skills built for them. So today I'm going to introduce you to a metaphor we use at the Umbrella Project to help bring all the pieces together in your mind of your child or your students' coping skills, and then talk about some ways that we can all get on the same page in understanding what children's coping strengths are and where they need more attention and energy, because every student and every child is unique. And this is what we're hoping to provide schools and families, is an easy way to understand what each child needs within a framework that can be presented in the classroom and supported by parents. So welcome. We will have time later in the session to do an activity. So that should be great too. And I think you'll all enjoy getting a look at your own coping skills through that activity. So a little bit about the Umbrella Project first. The Umbrella Project is a curriculum that runs in close to 300 schools, teaching students this basic metaphor that I'm going to share with you shortly. And then each month we go through and talk about a different coping skill, help students identify that skill in themselves and in the world around them, and really share stories and inspiration around how to build these coping skills. I'm just going to put in the chat here. Sorry. There we go. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to type it into the chat, and I'll try to get to them either through the presentation or at the end. So back to the Umbrella Project. The other things that we have conferences that we are building to inspire students to take on the challenge of building their coping skills. We call them pop-ups because they're conferences that schools can pop up and run, virtual conferences with all sorts of great speakers and partners. Our last conference featured Christine Sinclair, which was very exciting. I got to talk to her about how she copes with the challenge of being a professional and now gold medal soccer player. So interesting and really informative for students to understand how all the coping skills come together and start to work to help somebody achieve their goals. So, and then we also have parenting programs that help you individually have a look at your own coping skills and that of your children, and really understand where to focus your precious parenting energy. If you're anything like me as a parent, I have a lot on the go. And so I really do find that tailoring your parenting to what your child specifically needs is a great place to start to focus energy on positive coping, to know that you're doing the right things for your child, and also to save yourself some energy from trying to do it all. So a little bit about me. My name is Dr. Jen. I am a naturopathic doctor specializing in pediatrics and pediatric mental health. I'm also the founder of the Umbrella Project, and I am a mom as well. So I have 3 kids, 2 teenagers and a toddler. So that's an interesting parenting journey right now for me. two very different sets of needs with the kids. And so definitely learning to juggle more than I thought was possible. But ultimately, I'm extremely passionate about mental health. I think that we have a huge challenge currently in the world with the new generation of kids who are growing up with the extra layer of technology that many of us might not have had, and the world being much more visible to us, a lot more information on a day-to-day basis for students to take in and process. And because of that, I think we really need to speed up our teaching of coping skills in helping students, thrive and really understand how they can protect themselves from challenges and still take on life despite so much going on. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So our mission at the Umbrella Project is really to help students, teachers, parents, families practice the coping skills that they need to thrive. And we think that there's a beautiful spot in education to teach these coping skills, and a beautiful spot in parenting to support what's being taught in schools. I like to think about coping skills like your core muscles. I just had a baby last year, and so after having the baby, I went to physio to help strengthen my core again. And the physio was talking about all the different layers of muscles and how important it is that those first engage before you do anything else. And so I like to think about coping skills very much the same way. Coping skills are all the skills that we have to engage in order to do everything else that we do. So once we've built that foundation, that core of coping skills for students, it makes it so much easier to do all of the other things that they do, whether that's interacting in their friendships, other subjects in school, taking on math or science or things that are, can be quite difficult for children, or dealing with the day-to-day stresses of life. All of those things become easier if we can engage that core of coping skills first. So really our mission is to recognize the importance of all of these skills and then make it easy to build these skills for students and for children. We know that school is a very busy place. Parents are very busy. If there was anything that I heard as I was building the Umbrella Project, it was that this needed to be straightforward and easy. There needed to be a way that this didn't take away from everything else that we're doing. So our curriculum, our conferences, our parenting strategies all look to weave what you're already doing, coping skills into what you're already doing, to help recognize that coping skills are built through practice, and our lives provide us lots of opportunities to practice coping skills. We don't need a whole separate thing to do that. We can really use what's happening to us in life to help practice these important skills, and then to make it easier for parents and teachers to do this for themselves and for their students. Ultimately, we just want to create that community that celebrates positive coping. So what I love about this conference and, really recognizing the partnership between school and parents and caregivers is that it takes a village to make a change when it comes to mental health. And I think the partnership between all of these people and the community around positive coping is what's going to make that happen. I often tell my patients, it's no longer a competition between kids for who's going to get the top marks. Our kids are so connected to each other through technology. In fact, they hardly ever have a break from each other. So when one child is not thriving, it really can spread through communities. And when kids are surrounded by a thriving community of people who are coping with challenges, it also makes it easier for them to cope. So we need to recognize that there's this effect now within kids where the more well we can make everybody, the more our own individual children will thrive in that system. So these are some of the school boards that we work with. We're in 18 school boards now across Ontario, and we also have some international schools as well who run the Umbrella Project. So because of that, we get to see and hear lots and lots about what's going on with students right now. And so we're so excited to be able to present here today, always looking to, bring this information to more and more people so that we can do a better job of supporting the mental health of our next generation. So let's take a minute here I'm just going to show you a quick 2-minute video, and I apologize, I have to show it to you through YouTube today. So there will be probably a 3 or 4 second ad that we'll have to listen to before the video starts. But this video sums up the umbrella effect metaphor on which all of our information is built. So what we've done is we've taken all the top research about how we survive and thrive through good and bad times, and we've put it into a really simple metaphor that we call the umbrella effect. Really, stress is quite a lot like the rain that we experience, and our coping skills really do act quite a bit like an umbrella to protect us from those. So I'm going to play this 2-minute video for you. It really does provide the foundation of what we're going to talk about today. And then we'll talk about some of the big ideas, the research behind how we can have better mental health. And then we'll get into some individual assessments. So I'm just going to hit play here.
Hey, I'm Russ Ruffino. And if you're a coach, consultant, expert, author, or speaker, I have just one question.
There we go.
Throughout our lives, we are met with many challenges and setbacks. Much like the rain, these are aspects of our life that most people experience and we have little control over. Life isn't always sunny, and we spend a lot of energy wishing the storm clouds away, instead of properly protecting ourselves from the rain overhead. The good news is we are all equipped with an umbrella. Some are big, some are small, others have holes, or have been forgotten in our closet, but everybody's got one. Our umbrella is made of emotional and cognitive skills like gratitude, empathy, grit, purpose, and many more. These skills are shared by the happiest and most successful people and can be highly predictive of future well-being. Through using our umbrella skills, we can actually strengthen our umbrella and start to reframe the challenges we experience, downgrading what felt like a tornado to a light drizzle. All of the skills are important and work best together. For example, working hard day after day with grit is great, but with no sense of purpose is unfulfilling. As our umbrella grows, healthy habits are important to provide the strength it takes to hold it up, especially when the big storms roll through. Using our umbrella gives us the confidence to actively pursue life's opportunities despite the weather. And after the rain, we may even find some puddles to play in. When we're young, we depend on umbrellas around us to provide protection. But as we grow and venture out on our own, we want to make sure we are using our own umbrella. Using your own umbrella is empowering. Relying on other people's umbrellas places our well-being in their hands. In really strong groups, everyone has their own umbrella. That way, when you need some extra shelter and support, there's lots to go around. Other people will use their umbrellas more just from watching us use ours. It's a ripple effect. The best way to teach the umbrella skills is to set an example by using your own.
Okay. So you can see from that video, there's a couple key points that I really want you to know when you're thinking about building your child's coping skills. The first is that in life, challenge is inevitable. We can't avoid all challenges for our children, and we can't protect them forever from anything ever happening to them. It's really important that we wrap our heads around the fact that every single child will face challenges through their life. And therefore, every single child needs coping skills in order to help them get through those difficulties. And so the very first thing to remember is that challenges are not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, they're a very normal thing. And reframing in our minds that it's okay and normal for our kids to struggle at times is the first step in helping to protect them from challenges. The next thing is that we don't need to leave this to chance. So we do know that there are lots of coping skills in the research that help to make challenges easier for kids. So you saw some of them in that video, but we like to think about them as umbrella skills. And basically, each coping skill forms a piece of an umbrella that helps to protect us from challenges. And the more complete our umbrella is, the more protected we are when things are difficult. So we can protect ourselves, we can build ourselves these really important coping skills in advance of needing them. Or after we need them, but we can continue throughout our lives to build and add on to this umbrella of coping skills. And we can also, at any time, kind of take a snapshot of what that umbrella looks like. So this is one of the activities that we'll do today, is a snapshot of your own umbrellas at this moment, but we can assess and understand where our kids are strong and where they could use a little bit of extra help. What often happens is we tend to rely on our strong skills and avoid opportunities to build those other skills that are harder for us. So we tend to, the gritty get grittier and the empathetic get more empathetic, but we kind of shy away from doing the things that are hard for us. But when we really look at the research, we know that if we can build and help our kids build a more complete set of coping skills, we really can make sure that as parents, we can feel confident that they can take on challenges as they come. So we'll do that snapshot today. And so you can understand your own umbrellas a little better. We also know that these coping skills help to make challenges more manageable. So the more coping skills you have, the easier it is for you to perceive challenges as manageable. And your story becomes one of resilience in that if you think about this like the weather, if you knew that it was raining outside and you didn't want to get wet, you would feel more confident going out in the rain if you had an umbrella. If you knew you had a tool that you could open up and use in that weather. And stress and coping actually works very similarly to this. So the more confident we feel that we have the tools to get through challenges, the easier it becomes to actually get through those challenges. And the more we can take on life. We don't have to wait until the conditions seem just perfect. We can actually go out there, even in difficult times, and take on challenges. So all of our programs and all of the work that we do is focused around helping kids to feel like they have that intrinsic sense of control over their circumstances, where they're not waiting for the perfect sunny day to go outside. They know that they have a tool that they can use to take on challenges. We also spend some time, and we won't talk too much about it today, talking about the effects of healthy lifestyle on coping skills. Because if anybody here has ever been hangry before, which is, when you feel grumpy because you're hungry, if anyone didn't know what hangry means, we recognize very quickly that what we put in our body has a big effect on our ability to use our coping skills. It's much more difficult to be empathetic, for example, when we're hungry and feeling grumpy because of that, or when we haven't had enough sleep, or if we've been on a screen all day. So our lifestyle has a huge impact on our ability to use coping skills. So what we really want to look at doing is building this umbrella of coping skills and helping our children develop this umbrella of coping skills, and then feeding their brains the inputs that they need in order to hold up that big umbrella of coping skills. So looking at their nutrition and their sleep and how much time they get outside and those types of things. And then the final point is that, some challenges, and I always want to mention this, are too big for one umbrella to weather. we aren't meant to live a life alone, and the umbrella project and the umbrella effect is not about doing this alone and just having your own umbrella. The more we watch people use their coping skills, the more we're likely to use those same skills to protect us when situations come up. And the more people we have around us with strong umbrellas of coping, the easier it becomes to cope in difficult times. So really important to recognize that the goal is not just to build your child's individual umbrella of coping, but to make sure that they're part of a community of people who have strong coping skills. So really making sure that everybody's getting this information, everybody's getting a chance to build and work on their umbrellas. I love the part in the video with the person who's trying to get underneath the other person's umbrella, because this is another important thing to recognize as parents, especially, is that it's natural and important for us to want to protect our kids from challenges. And when they're young, a big part of our job is to help them and to protect them from difficult times. But as they grow up, we really want them to have their own umbrella of coping skills. So we don't want them to be reliant on us to get them through difficult times. We want to make sure that they have their own tool so that they can protect themselves and so that they can be a strong member of a community and help protect others when they need that too. So focusing on building this umbrella of coping skills is for you, it's for your child, it's for their future communities and all the people that will be part of their lives. So that's very important because that's really what creates a society that copes well with difficult times. So one easy way to quickly think about your child's coping is as a ratio of rain to umbrella. And we really saw this playing a huge role during and still during the recent pandemic. So if you think about having, a big golf umbrella and it's sprinkling outside, you're likely to be pretty dry underneath that umbrella. And if you imagine I send you out in a monsoon with a cocktail umbrella, you're likely to be completely soaked. And so our coping skills and the ratio of rain to umbrella in our lives is very similar to this. If your child has a lot of coping skills and there's not a lot of rain in their lives at that time, they're likely to be fairly protected and have positive outcomes underneath their umbrella. On the other side, if they have a lot of stress going on and not enough coping skills to deal with that stress, they're likely to be really struggling underneath that. So it's a really simple way to look at your child, but it's important to know because it's important to remember that this isn't a always thing. We can't say my child's great at coping with challenges, period, and that's that. We're always have to be kind of watching them and assessing how much they have going on relative to how their coping skills are developed at that point. And really making sure that we have a bit of a pulse on that because, sometimes that difficult friend might be completely fine for your child to take on themselves with just a little coaching from you. And sometimes that difficult friend might be the last straw in an already overwhelmed coping situation where they require you to step in a little more and help them. So this is a great way, I think, to think about how much help you should be giving your children with coping. The ultimate goal is that we allow them to cope with as much as they can on their own, that they build that confidence for coping, but that we're always aware when they become overwhelmed or when there's just too much going on, because that can lead downstream to issues as well. So think about that umbrella to rain ratio. This research out of Harvard really shows the exact same thing. They used a scale instead of an umbrella and rain. But basically what this research showed is that, when positive outcomes outweigh negative outcomes in our child's life, their scale tips towards positive and you see that, that they're coping well. But on the positive side also goes coping skills. So it's not just outcomes, it's also the thing that we can add to the positive side is coping skills. And we want to try to weigh down that positive side or build that umbrella relative to the ratio of rain. So we're thinking ratio always when it comes to coping. So the umbrella project, then we're focusing on building that strong umbrella. We're focusing on normalizing rain. So this is a really important thing to think about as a parent and as a teacher, making sure that students really do understand that it's normal to experience challenges. One of the things I often used to do in assemblies when assemblies were still going on of students is I would have everybody in the room stand up, and then I would have them sit down when they heard something that they had been through before in life. So I would go through a list of challenges one by one, and I would have students sit down if they heard something that they'd been through. So I might use something like, getting in a fight with a friend. And inevitably, all of these challenges or doing poorly on a test or an exam. And what we would find is that the whole room would sit down when you mentioned these challenges, because everybody experiences challenges. They're quite a normal part of life. And the thing that I loved about doing that is that after a couple examples, this giggle would spread through the room because students were looking around and realizing that everybody was experiencing the same things as they were. So in an instant, it became clear to them that, maybe they weren't alone in their struggle, and that maybe some of these challenges, while unpleasant and not something anybody enjoys, were actually a pretty normal part of growing up and being a child. So to start, when you're talking to your children, make sure they understand that it's normal and okay to struggle a little bit, and that these challenges are expected. If you have time to head to our website, umbrellaproject.co, on our blog, you'll find lots of different tips and articles for helping to do just this, helping to normalize rain and to build these umbrella skills. So the more we can normalize rain, the less it feels like it's raining for your child. And the more we can strengthen those umbrellas, the bigger their layer of protection, and we can start to shift the ratio for our kids. And this is just a reminder, stress is not necessarily just a good or bad thing. There is a positive stress, and that stress is what allows us to grow and adapt and learn. So our children require a layer of stress in their lives in order to learn how to cope with it and get stronger at coping, get stronger at adapting to difficult situations. So we see in all of the research that these essential life coping skills actually grow with manageable challenge. So again, what we're looking for our kids is challenge that feels within the range of what they can handle, but really allowing them to go out and take on these challenges and learn. So this is just a quick list of all of the different umbrella skills, and I'll share with you in the chat the umbrella assessment that we're going to do in a minute, and you'll be able to have a list of all of these skills. But you can see there's a big range of different coping skills that we need. So everything from a skill like cognitive flexibility, which allows us to adapt to changing circumstances. We really saw this skill in the forefront during the last few years for coping. Or self-compassion, where instead of beating ourselves up when something goes wrong, adding insult to injury, we're kind to ourselves like we would be to a good friend. And that's another coping skill that allows us to just deal with what's happened instead of adding an extra layer onto what's happened, which is us bullying ourselves. There's things like gratitude and mindfulness, kindness, all these skills that you've probably heard about, resilience, but each one does something a little different for our kids. And when you put them all together, they really do form what we need to take on challenge. So I'm just going to take a minute and put an assessment into the chat that we're going to take a minute to do. So if you click on the link, what you'll get is an umbrella assessment. And the assessment looks kind of like this, except it's a fillable form, so you can do it on your computer. And what you'll see is that there are little boxes and there's 3 questions for each skill. Now you have a blinded version so that you're not influenced by seeing what skill you're answering questions about, but they're labeled from A to, I think, anyway, A onward, and you'll be able to match the skill to the umbrella picture on the 2nd page or on the 3rd page. So we're going to take a minute and evaluate our own umbrellas. And this is a really, really important starting point for coping, because as I'm sure you felt when you looked at that list of 18 skills, that's a lot of skills to try to help your child develop. But everybody is individual, and your child's life up to this point has probably allowed them to develop some of those skills quite strongly and others not as much. So the very first thing that is important when we look at coping skills is understanding what your strengths are and what opportunities you have to build stronger skills, and which areas of your umbrella are weak. Professor Leo Waters out of Australia has done a lot of research on strengths-based parenting. And that basically means that we parent in a way that we know our children's strong coping skills and that we help them regularly see those skills in themselves. So if your child is very kind, for example, and uses kindness as a coping skill, we're helping them notice that about themselves, and then we're pointing it out to them as they use that skill. And what we know is that when children know their strengths, their strong coping skills, they're much more likely to use them in situations where they have to cope. So learning our strengths, that's one step. And if you do nothing else, just knowing what your child's strong coping skills are will improve their well-being. So, and helping them to notice that about themselves. But I like to take it one step further and build into the holes in their umbrella. And the reason I think that's so important is that sometimes our coping skills are getting us by okay, and we're relying on the strong skills, but eventually we hit points in life where we really do need all of the skills. And so when I think about my own life, I grew up with a mom who's extremely empathetic, and so one of my strengths is definitely empathy. I got to watch that a lot. I got to practice it with my mom. But because she was so empathetic, one of the things that was really difficult for her was watching my sister and I struggle. So whenever a challenge would come our way, she would break out her big umbrella and hold it over us and protect us as much as she could from challenges. And by doing that, one of the skills that didn't develop very strongly for me was autonomy, my ability to have a say in the direction of my life and to really feel like I was able to go out and execute and do life for myself. I always wanted someone else's opinion. I always felt like I didn't quite have the skills to go out there and take on that challenge. So, and that was just a function of how she parented us, some great and some skills missing. So as I got older and started to work, I realized that is a really important skill. I wasn't going to get through my life without being able to develop this skill more strongly. So recognizing what those are allows us to intervene earlier with our kids and make sure that they have the skills that they're going to need to take on challenges. So what I'm going to do now is give you about 5 to 10 minutes to fill out the umbrella assessment for yourself. When it comes to building coping skills for kids, the very first starting point is understanding your own coping skills, because how we cope as parents has a huge impact on how our kids are coping. And so understanding your own umbrella of coping skills first is a great place to start. I also find for older kids that they're much more likely to do these types of activities if if other people are doing them too. So most teenagers, and especially those who are struggling with their mental health, are tired of it being all about them, and they don't particularly want to do more and more, proactive coping skill development. But the more they can see us doing it and other people doing this around them, the more likely they are to also take on the challenge of learning about their coping skills and developing them. So starting with you, you're going to do the umbrella assessment today for yourself and learn about your own coping skills. And then you have this interactive link. So when you leave here today, this is something you can do with your families, with your partners. We had one teacher after doing this who printed out these assessments and took them to her family Thanksgiving dinner and made her whole extended family do their umbrella assessment, which I thought was quite funny. But it really is a great discussion tool for understanding just a snapshot of where you are now. Once you're finished, and this is something you can do after the session, you can draw your umbrella like this if you want, but I'd really love for you to take a few minutes to put in, what you notice as your strongest coping skills, and then your opportunities that you have to improve. So if everyone can just take a minute and click on the link now to see if they can, to start the umbrella assessment. We had one person in the last session who struggled to pull it up. But is everybody able to access the assessment? If you could maybe just type yes into the text or the chat if you can. Okay. Okay, so it looks like we have one person who might not be able to access it. I'm not sure why. Might just be the maybe the browser. So I'm gonna put an email into the text box here. Unfortunately, I don't think I will be able to get the assessment for you for this session because we only have a few minutes here. But if you email this email address, admin@umbrellaproject.co, and just let them know that you were unable to open the link, we will send you a copy that you can, an email copy so that you have it. So it is 3:07. I'm just going to give 5 to 10 minutes here. I'll check back in 5 minutes to see how you're doing. Oh, maybe I can. I'm just going to put the link in again here. There we go. See if you can get it. And I'll let you start on your assessment here, and we'll chat about it in just a few minutes. So please take a few minutes and fill out your umbrella assessment, and we'll be back shortly. Okay, how's everyone doing here? If you need a few more minutes, maybe just type yes into the chat box. Does anyone need a few more minutes? Okay, perfect. We'll give a couple more minutes here. Okay, so I'm going to stop everyone there. Please feel free to finish after if you haven't quite had enough time to finish up. So the first thing I want you to do with your umbrella assessment that you have is have a look at the scores for each skill. If you're not sure which skill is what, you can look on the third page and it'll show you based on the letter what skill. And have a look at what skills are strongest for you. I'm going to walk you through this in a way that I also think if you do this with your children is important to talk to them about as well. So the very first thing is just noticing what your strong coping skills are. And, you know, coping skills are hard earned. Usually your strong coping skills are the ones that you've had to use to cope with challenges. So take a minute to just feel proud of the areas that are strong for you and really think about how you use those skills. And you know, I really want you to feel proud of your strong coping skills. And then the next thing is to take a look at the opportunities you have to strengthen your umbrella. So look at the skills that came up the lowest for you. I'll talk generally now because there's some very common patterns with adults. So self-compassion and mindfulness and lifestyle tend to be the three things that come back the lowest in most of the adults I work with, specifically self-compassion and lifestyle. And you can probably imagine when it comes to a healthy lifestyle, parents are notorious and teachers for putting themselves last. So it's not a surprise that most of us find it hard to get to the gym or, you know, choose healthy foods or take time to just go for a walk outside for ourselves. So that's one that comes up quite a bit. And then self-compassion is the other skill that comes up quite low for most people. In fact, Kristen Neff's research, she's the lead researcher in self-compassion, has shown that 75% of us are harder on ourselves than we are on other people. And essentially, when you don't have self-compassion, it's like having a bully in your head all the time. So not only are you struggling with something, but your brain is is beating yourself up for that struggle or for that mistake. So self-compassion is the skill that allows us to be kind to ourselves, and recognize that we deserve the same care that our friends deserve from ourselves. So those two skills come up low often, and I think it's important to recognize that. Did anybody find that those were some of their lower skills, or one of those came up low for them? You can use the chat if you want, just to share if you'd like. Yeah, it's not something that we have spent a lot of time teaching. Self-compassion especially is something that I think everybody needs. And really, we've just barely started to recognize that as an important skill. But you can imagine the value of your kids understanding from a very young age that it's important to be kind to yourself. That self-compassion is a very protective skill when things go wrong. We tend to see a huge dip in self-compassion in grade 7, 8. I don't know if any of you have middle school kids. I do. And I can certainly see that happening. Tends to be the years where kids are most hard on themselves. And so trying to really instill some parenting strategies before your kids need these skills is important. So that's the next thing, is to take a moment and really think about, what your opportunities are, and then try to think about the chances you have in your life to work on those skills. So the next time you notice yourself, being really hard on yourself about something, really try to use deliberate practice to make that an opportunity to practice a skill. So, and it's hard at the beginning. It feels often forced to work on your coping skills. But the more you use deliberate practice, the more you do it intentionally, the easier it becomes, and the more likely you are to use that skill again. So, and then the best thing you can do as a parent or as a teacher is enroll your kids in what you're doing. So you can put your umbrella on the fridge if you want, and you can share with your children what you're going through. So maybe you say, I made a mistake at work today, and normally I'm really hard on myself about that, but I'm trying to be kind to myself. I'm trying to think about what I might tell my sister or my friend if that happened to them, and I'm telling myself that. And you can explain to your children how you're using your coping skills, because when we are unsure about how to deal with the world, we look around at what everyone else is doing, and we tend to do that. So the more your children see coping skills in action, the more they understand how you're getting through difficulties, the more likely they are to understand that for themselves. And then the last thing, I just, in the chat, Jennifer just wrote, she needs some duct tape for her umbrella. Yes, after the pandemic, I redid my umbrella assessment as well, and I could use some of that duct tape as well. I think most of us are a bit worn down. So, yeah. So, and then the last thing to do with your umbrella assessment to start is to think about why your umbrella looks the way it does now. So the example I just mentioned, I tend to think of myself as a pretty resilient person, but I feel fairly worn down by the last couple of years of being a mom and running a business, and watching my children struggle through the pandemic. And so my resilience is low compared to where it usually is. Or the example I shared with my mom and how she parented us growing up. The more you understand why you are where you are, and why your umbrella looks the way it does now, the easier it is for you to start to do things that will help to rebuild that. So for me, looking at my umbrella and realizing how low my resilience is right now really alerted me to the fact that I need to take some time for self-care and really build back up my energy and my resilience that way. And for me, shifting my narrative about some of the difficult things was also something I needed to do. But the more you look at your umbrella and understand yourself and the patterns, and why your umbrella looks the way it does now, the easier it is for you to to really get involved with yourself and really start to fill in some of those holes. So that's what I would love for you to do with your umbrella assessment here. And then when it comes to your kids, sitting down and looking at this with them, these are some things that you can discuss with them. And then I have a one thing rule. So my one thing rule is that when you try to do too much as a parent, especially when it comes to coping skills, it often ends up backfiring because you just get overwhelmed. There are a million different possible interventions when it comes to coping, and so many different things you can do with your kids. So noticing where you can best spend your effort is critical, so that you don't get overwhelmed. If any of you are a parent like me, I'm sure you're quite busy. And so it's important to be selective. So noticing your child's strengths, pointing them out as much as you can, and then picking one skill that you think is really influencing your child's ability to cope, and doing, little every day, something little to build that skill. So if you go to our website, umbrellaproject.co, in the blog, we have all of our parenting tips categorized by skill. So if you're looking to work on your child's authenticity or their cognitive flexibility, you can just search by skill and then read through the parenting tips and pick one or two that you think jive with your family, and the way that make it easy for you to work on that skill with your child. So in this way, you can slowly start to add layers to your child's ability to cope. If your child is at an umbrella project school that's running the curriculum, you can also month by month, we send parenting tips home for each skill. So each month a different skill is focused on. And so when you see those parenting tips come home, think about whether that skill is one your child really needs some support with. And if it is, read through the parenting tips and maybe pick out one thing that you can do that month to really help your child develop the coping skill that school is talking about at that time. Or just point out that skill as much as you can in the world around you. So this is also a really great way to build coping skills, is just help to make them more visible for your kids. So if your school is talking about empathy, you can, every time you see it, just point it out to your kids when you're watching a movie or a show, when when somebody phones you to check in on you or whatever it is. Make that very visible, that layer, that umbrella layer in the world, make that visible for your kids and talk about coping skills as they come up, as your child is learning about them, so that they really become part of your child's vocabulary. We had an experience with a kindergarten student, so cute. His mom said that they were learning about grit at that time in class. And her son went to hockey that night and is not a very strong skater. And so he came home from hockey and said to his mom, Mom, I used a lot of grit at hockey tonight. I fell down so many times and I kept getting back up. And that really, to me, shows the power of just knowing what the coping skills are. Without knowing that was grit that he was using, he could have, come home and said, I'm a terrible skater. I don't want to play hockey anymore. But just knowing what that skill is allowed him to see it in himself. And I think if we can make these skills visible to kids, if we can make sure that they know when they're using these skills, they can take pride and take value out of even the difficult times. And so make sure you make those skills very visible for your kids. So I'm just going to go to the chat here and answer any questions you have. We're just down to our last few minutes here. Okay, so 2 out of 9 in self-compassion. Yes, that is a very, very common score. Unfortunately, we've never really taught that skill to our generation. So a lot of us think it's actually beneficial for us to beat ourselves up when things go wrong, that it's motivating. But if any of you have ever had a bully before, you'll realize that bullies are not very motivating. Your best friend is probably a much better motivator. So, that's something definitely for all of us to take home and think about. You're certainly not alone, Shelley, in scoring low on that. How do schools become Umbrella Project schools? If you go to our website, umbrellaproject.co, you can send us a message. Usually school administrators choose to run the Umbrella Project for their school. So if you're a parent and you're looking to have your school start the Umbrella Project, you can email us. We can send you some information to share with your school administrators about whether the program would be a good fit for them. So umbrellaproject.co is where you can find out more. How did you select these particular skills? So when we were building the Umbrella Project, we were working with different schools on coping strategies, and we were realizing that, it was schools would do a mindfulness program, or maybe they focus on empathy, or all these different skills, but there was no real centralized way to for a school to make sure that they were focusing on all the important skills. So we did a huge lit review of all the research on coping skills, and we picked out the 18 skills that come up with the hugest amount of research. So each of these skills individually has hundreds upon thousands of studies and pieces of research showing their value in coping. And so we really just tried to select out the ones that had the most research-backed information about coping. Does anybody else have any other questions? I think we're just at the end of time here. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question today and you'd like to, you can also email us. I added the email earlier, but you can email admin@umbrellaproject.co, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Is there an optimal age group to introduce this to? So when it comes to the Umbrella Project curriculum, we run K to 12 because I think there's never too early to start learning about these skills. And the curriculum changes based on age. The stories that we share and the activities that we have are different, but we start as early as kindergarten. When it comes to the umbrella assessment, I would say if you're sitting down with your child, probably around grade 3 is the earliest that I would use this assessment tool. But grade 4 all the way up to adulthood, this is a really useful tool. Before grade 3, kids aren't as reflective on how they deal with challenges. Their brains haven't quite developed to that level yet. So instead, for young kids, what I usually do is I have parents just think about the skill and what they see in their child, or talk to their child a little bit about empathy and kindness and some of these different skills, and to get a sense of what they think their child's strongest skills are, and which ones could use some more support. So they're really, I would say, it's applicable to all ages, but we do see grade 4 to 8 as probably the optimal range where there's time in class to run the curriculum and kids are really engaged with the program. So, all right. Well, thank you all for joining me today. Oh, one more question. Are you familiar with the zones of regulation framework? My school's admin has hinted at moving towards using that. Could that be integrated with this? Yes, we have integrations with all sorts of different programs. We see the Umbrella Project as a great framework for kids and schools and teachers to understand how all the pieces work together. And then other programs like Zones of Regulation or Mind Up or all the different programs that are out there provide great pieces to deepen the school's well-being commitment, and they really do fit in nicely with the framework of the Umbrella Project. So we have all those integrations available too. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Take care.